the Mountain State Land Authority Board. This board is also co-chaired by our Lieutenant Governor, Deidre Henderson, and Madam Lieutenant Governor will be joining us in a few minutes. She has another matter that she's working on with the governor, has asked to be excused for the beginning of this meeting. We welcome you here, members of the public. We welcome also our staff. Let me just say to our board, some of us are here present and some will be joining virtually yet. We don't quite have a quorum, but we believe that in time we will. But those who are here and have joined virtually, we welcome you too. Thanks for accommodating us on making a change of our meeting. It worked out better. It allowed some of our team to work with the governor and his One Utah Summit on Tuesday. So thanks for letting us make this switch. So a little bit of an update and background. I need to get close to this mic so you can hear me. If you've been following a little bit in the news and maybe otherwise, we continue to make significant progress on this project. Since our April meeting, we have held a very productive meeting with legislative leadership, conducted a constructive workshop with our Phase 1 development partner finalists, continuing to work to refine the X-Point proposal, further define the engineering work needed for Phase 1, evaluated additional financing alternatives, coordinated the transition to the new correctional facility with the Department of Corrections. That's kind of an exciting event that's going to be coming up this summer. Initiated conversations with companies interested in locating their headquarters at the point, began working on the FY23 budget, organized the working groups that the board approved last month, provided comments on the proposed regional transportation plan, and much more. We'll discuss a lot of those items in our meeting today. As I go through that list of things and accomplishments since we last met, I can't help but think how much we appreciate our staff, Alan, our director to my left, Scott, and all those that work with him, Muriel, all of our staff. We couldn't accomplish what we do without dedicated folks and staff. I know Steve Kellenberg is also online with us, and we appreciate his input. So with that in the way of background, and as we move forward with the agenda, I'd like to take up item number 2 on the agenda, which is our public comment. And I remind everyone often, including those in the audience, virtual audience listening, that as a board, we have a responsibility to ensure that this project provides broad public benefits. This is a public project. This is a public meeting, and the board works on behalf of the public. We value the input from members of the public. In fact, over 10,000 Utahns residents have shared their priorities and ideas, their feedback, and actually has helped guide our planning. We welcome the public comments from those who are here and also from our virtual audience. So let me ask the folks that are here in the room first, how many of you here would like to participate in the public comment portion of our agenda? If you'd raise your hand. So we have 3, possibly 2. And then for the virtual audience, those attending by Zoom, if you would let us know if you intend to comment by raising your hand. And then Colton, if you could give me an idea how many we have there. All right, so let's get started with the gentlemen who are here that wish to comment. We're going to ask you to limit your comments to 2 to 3 minutes. If our limit is actually 3, but if we could have you help us limit, we've got a pretty aggressive agenda. If you could help us out, that would be great. So whoever would like to lead off, if you'd come up and have a seat at the table in front of you, pull down the mic, and we'll let you make your statement. Good morning. If you'd state your name so that we'll know who you are, and then you can proceed.
Hi, my name is Bill Germanson. I'm a pastor with St. Francis of Assisi Christian Church, and thank you all for the opportunity to address the committee. I'm here to encourage you to thoughtfully consider preserving the chapel by the wayside. As a pastor of reentry ministry, I can personally testify about the transformation in the lives of the residents of the prison, those who found the love of God while attending worship at the prison, and as a result, continued their walk with God after being released from the prison and emerged as contributing members of society. Saving the chapel would also be a testament that justice and mercy can walk hand in hand. Please consider saving the chapel by the wayside. It would be a tribute to the residents who asked for and built the prison, to the church and community groups who helped fundraising for the project, and all the volunteers, past and present, who faithfully reached out to our brothers and sisters incarcerated at the prison, offering hope, educational opportunities, and worship services at the chapel. Saving the chapel would be a lasting and loving remembrance of all the tears shed, the transformations of the prisoners, and the people of Utah who reached out their hands in love to their neighbors. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to our committee.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to make the comments. My name is Charles Hines. I'm an ordained minister in the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. And we planted a church at the prison 12 years ago and have done worship services for the past 12 years at the Timpanogos facility for women. And we've met in the chapel there. And we're not talking about that particular chapel, but the one we're talking about is symbolic of all. So often we've heard the prisoners say the prison is God's hospital. My life, I maybe would have died if I hadn't gone to prison. No telling what would have happened. But at the prison, they get help with the addictions that so many of them have. And in the chapel, many of the prisoners will find God. And we've come to see the chapels at the prison as holy ground, literally holy ground. Just a few thoughts on why it might be good to preserve the chapel by the wayside. In America, even in our prisons, people have the freedom of religion. It's not that way in many parts of the world. It's a testimony to the love and hope offered by God to prisoners. The chapel is symbolic of that. And it's a reminder that the Department of Corrections is there to help people improve their lives. And the chapels at the prison sing a song of lives being given hope and transformed. Fourth, it's a monument to the many churches and religions, so many different churches and religions that have answered the call to serve the least of these, God's children. Fifth, it is a place where volunteers have had their lives transformed as they serve God and their fellow man. And sixth, the chapel could continue to be a place of prayer and meditation for the people in Draper. In the middle of this world that we live in that travels at 1,000 miles an hour. A thought that came to my mind, and I'm going to conclude with this, and I hope I quote him properly. I'm going by memory. But I think Gandhi in the 1940s looked at the future. He said, one of the great dangers we will have will be progress, commerce without humanity. This is an opportunity to give a monument to humanity. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Hines. Anyone else here in the public in this room that would like to make comment as part of this item on the agenda? I don't see any hands, no one coming forward. Colton, anyone in our listening public or watching public that is raising their hand? Oh, you would like to make comment?
Well, I was going to be here with David, but I'm just going to take a minute. I have folders here for each of you on the committee. I've written a letter that I think supports the
let's-
cause that we're after.
Let's have you start with your name, please, and who you
My name is
represent.
Paul Hewitt, and I represent the prison ministry program from Wasatch Presbyterian Church here in Salt Lake. And I've been working in that program at the Draper Prison since 1986.
Thank you for being
And
here.
I have a vested interest in it. I spoke to you last month. And, but I've put together some papers here. We have about 7 or 8 letters from people that are speaking to
Why don't you
saving
go ahead
it.
and have a seat. And we'll accept the folders.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, letters from those folks that were not able to be here at the meeting, but I've included a couple of 3 sheets that talk about the spirit of prison ministry. And I think it'll be self-explanatory when you read it. So thank you.
Thank you for providing those. Thank you. Anyone else here from the public that would like to speak? Now I don't see any hands and anyone coming forward. And Colton, no one online that wants to take this time. Okay, thank you very much. So with that, we're going to take some items out of order while we're still waiting to collect a quorum. We have a number of items that require action. We're going to drop down to a few items that are informational in scope and so don't require action, and we'll wait until we get a quorum to consider those actions. So I'm going to drop down to item number 7, which is titled Innovation District Update. And we note that Representative Moss is with us. I think all of us know that we refer to the point as Utah's innovation community because we intend to create an ecosystem that advances creativity and problem solving and spins off new Utah businesses. The legislature has provided funding to the Utah system of higher ed to help create this innovation district at the point. And today we're fortunate to have Representative Jefferson Moss, who's not only a colleague of mine, serves with me in the House, but I also consider him a friend. And he won't probably talk about his background, but we're excited because of his background and experience in education that he brings to this position. He is going to be leading the innovation effort for Utah system of higher education. And today he's going to provide us an update on recent activities and plans for the coming months. So with that, we'll turn the time to you, Representative Moss. And if I haven't said enough good things about you, you can give me a high sign, but I think you're welcome and we're really honored to have you here.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the kind comments, and I feel the very same about you as many of you on this committee. It's a really good group, and I'm grateful to be part of this. And, when this job position came up, I actually hadn't really even thought about this. I'd been involved in it on the outside, looking at it from a legislative level, and it just happened to align very well with a number of things I was doing at Utah Valley University. And the more I looked into this, more I realized this is something I really was interested in. And it's turned out to be a really fun opportunity for me. And so I'm excited to give you a little update on where we're at and what we're doing. I think we're working on a slide deck. Is that being shared? So, we have been working. It's been, it was kind of interesting. I got the job January 1 and then started the session 2 weeks later. And so it's taken a little bit to really get the ball rolling, but we're moving very quickly and have a lot of great things that we're working on. I don't know if do I have a clicker? Or is that all right? Yeah, just so I don't have to keep asking you. Sorry, why is this not working? Let me ask him how to. Sorry, it's not moving forward. How do I make sure it's moving forward? Okay. There we go. Thank you. So I'm going to start with kind of what the original plan was that was presented to me. So when I came in, they said, we've got a pretty good idea of what this is going to be. And these were some of the things that this group had come together with all of the working groups that you'd had in preparation for kind of what this was going to look like. But the main point of this was really, how do we help drive this as an economic engine for the state? How do we really bring the full capacity and resources of our higher education system? How do we get them kind of out of the ivory tower and get them out working with industry, working alongside, both to solve problems for the state? We know that's a big component of what we're trying to do there. And then also, how do we treat this? How do we create an ecosystem that helps to create new innovation? How do we help drive new industries? How do we help support growing industries? And how do we make sure that we're providing the workforce alignment, public-private partnerships to help make sure that this innovation district really does provide what we've been asked to do? Some of the components of this, as this was provided in the information you had come up with, but the idea of having an accelerator, a place where we can incubate great ideas as technologies are coming out, a place that we can help support these businesses and really help them to grow. This convergence hall, I hear this every time I talk to people. The thing that we're missing in the state is a place for people to work together, right? This really converging of ideas, converging of industry and government and higher education, as well as industries together. I was in a meeting yesterday with Alan, and the individual was talking about a healthcare company, and he brought up how they're using AI. They're using all these other technologies that are really, normally you'd think are totally disparate industries, but it's the leveraging of those different industries together that's driving these really cool, innovative ideas. And so that's what we really see this as being, is how do we bring all those people in the same space to work together? But it's also more than just a hub, right? We're looking at it as a physical location, but my role, as I was told from my commissioner here, was to actually make sure that we're reaching beyond just our local area, making sure that all the other universities in the state are also very actively engaged, participating in this process, and making sure that we're using this as a tool for the entire state. Obviously, the universities play a very important role. They're the anchor institutions. We see a lot of technology come out of there. We also see a lot of students just creating their own businesses coming out of universities, and this would be a way to help support them. So at this point, where we're at is we're trying to define what is it, right? We have a pretty broad idea of what the scope is going to be, but now we're trying to narrow that down and be more definitive in what the scope and scale of this is going to be. And so we're really taking a three-pronged approach. The first is we're doing an internal evaluation. So at every university, we're creating a strike team, somebody that can be a point person for each university. They're going to help facilitate with who is it in their university, whether it be the traditional university, the tech schools, that's driving innovation, that's driving commercialization, that's doing public-private collaboration, that's doing workforce alignment and research. And so that's what we're doing right now, is kind of assessing the lay of the land and making sure we've got those partnerships in place. The next step is we're doing external research, and there's several of us that have been going out already looking at a number of sites and really drilling down, not just of, okay, we can go and see the coolest areas out there, but what are some that we think are more aligned to where we are as a state in terms of population size, in terms of some of the strengths that we bring as a state. And so we've been looking out at a number of places. I was in St. Louis last week and learned a lot about some of the things they're doing in their innovation district. In addition to that, we've got a lot of good data that we've just gathered internally about all of these different innovation districts and what are they doing well and what can we learn from. We already have started somewhat kind of getting the ball rolling with this with the Utah Innovation Lab that's going to be up at the Thomas S. Monson building. And the idea there is it's kind of a short term while we're building out the space down at the point. This will be a way for us to get that going. And it's a much smaller space, but it does provide that way to bring these different groups together to talk about different collaboration. We're going to be doing some really good working groups already out of there that will help to help us to drive innovation. We've talked about some of the clusters, and this is something we're actually still working through. There's been a number of ideas around what should be included. We are going to be kind of working through that over the next 6 months to define that a little better. But these are some of the things that we've heard as we've been out talking to people that there's a lot of interest in. And then what we've done is I've created a visioning committee, and a couple of the folks here are on that committee. And we pulled together, I think, a very good team to say, okay, we have a pretty broad scope. We're gathering all this data. We know what's happening in higher ed. Now let's really put the model together. And so we've gathered this group together. We're actually going to be having our first meeting on the 24th. And we're going to do a 6-month sprint. If you're familiar with like a sprint where you're doing this, kind of design thinking concepts, but basically building from the ground up, here's kind of the context. Over the next 6 months, let's define this down. And the goal is at the end of that we can come back to you and have a much more definitive idea of what we think would be valuable as we're building out the point. So as you look down that list, you see we've got a variety of different perspectives and backgrounds. Some that are on the venture capital side, some that are in the higher ed side, some that are more community focused, some that are more government focused. And so this is the group we'll be putting together. Again, some of you here are on that committee. And then finally, this is the timeline. I felt strongly that we didn't want to have an open-ended kind of just let's kind of see how it goes and get there. I wanted a definitive time frame, partly because the people that are on this committee are all very busy people. And I want to give them a concrete plan for what we hope to do. And the goal is by the 15th of November, we can come back to this group and to any others that we need to go talk to and say, here's what we've gathered. This is what we think would be the best way to go. And of course, that's always going to be a moving thing, but we want to have a more clear plan for you from the Innovation District side, what we think would be the right thing to do. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my remarks, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Let's go to Representative Handy for questions.
Yeah, thanks. Terrific presentation. Good for you. What a fun job, Jeff. Good for you. You're going to be great doing this. I wanted just to tee up a little bit. Up in my area, we have the at Hill Air Force Base and the surplus area called, that's governed by MIDA, which you understand, but Falcon Hill. Mm-hmm. And of course, there was the building built in the days of U-Star. Mm-hmm. That now has been given to, not given to, but anyway, Weber State now has that. It's rebranded to Weber State, and it's a tremendous innovation center. I was there a month or so ago for a great thing that UAMI was doing. And so anyway, if you don't know about that, just plug yourself into that, because I think it'll be really great to coordinate all of these similar efforts. And that's I believe what you're doing at USHE, and that's terrific. So just if you didn't know about that, you probably already did, but and they're gonna. I know that they have a donor that they're going to be announcing soon that's going to brand the building, I think, but I don't know who it is. But anyway, that's coming. But FYI.
Representative Handy, thank you for that, because that is very, very important. We have been looking and working closely with that group.
Good.
But I think that's a very good point, that we don't want this perception to be that we're going to go and pull everything down. Our job, especially being that we're under higher ed, is how do we bring all the best things that are happening around the state? And maybe there's things we can still support better at Falcon Hill from a higher ed perspective. They're doing some great things with Weber State. Are there other schools that we could help get integrated? Exactly. You start talking about cybersecurity, which I know there's doing quite a bit there. There's other parts throughout the state that may be able to add to that as well. And then vice versa. What are we doing at Falcon Hill that we can share back to? I mean, we've got people on the committee from Utah Tech down in St. George, and we've got people up in Logan. Maybe there's ways to better collaborate even around existing things like Falcon Hill.
Terrific.
So thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you, Representative Handy. Commissioner Wilson, let me get your mic. There you go.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Jefferson, for putting all this together. You can see why it was an easy decision to bring Representative Moss on to run these efforts. And not only the work he's doing on the institutions to bring it together, a lot of our institutions are doing great work, but sometimes it's siloed. And what we're seeing here is an opportunity for all the institutions to bring their great things together to really start to capitalize on the great things that are going on. And there's going to be so much effort and so many good things coming out of the cross-pollination, if you will, of the things that they're working on. But I don't want to miss the opportunity that we're going to have to put students in a position to be better connected to workforce than what we currently have. And that's one of our major efforts right now in the system of higher education is workforce development and social mobility as we move forward. And I think as we get more and more students engaged in this process at the undergraduate level, it's just going to open the doors that we probably haven't had open in the state. So thank you for your work on this. One of the things I can say is Jefferson's just taking the ball and run. And that's what we need. That's the leadership we need in these efforts. And it's very well respected throughout the institutions. And as you all know, sometimes that's a little bit of a challenge to get the institutions to work together, but but he's done a great job of doing that. And I think they're starting to see the benefits of it. So thank you.
And Commissioner, if I could just add one thing to that, if that's okay, Chair.
Sure.
Even on the committee, we did acknowledge too that we want to make sure that we're reaching all of our students, particularly those are some of the underserved students. And so some of the people that we brought on the committee were intentionally to say there's certain demographics that we're not seeing as engaged, both in the workforce, maybe providing better opportunities, but also in creating new businesses. And so we're intentionally saying, how do we try to get as many of those students to participate in this process as we can?
Thank you, Representative, and thanks, Commissioner, for the question. And Representative, one of the last comments you made was related to a question I was going to ask, and I am going to ask, and that is, I hope you will remember in the process the institutions that are off the Wasatch Front. Don't know whether everyone knows this, but we're going to have an institution called Utah Tech University in my neighborhood, and I can't think of a better name. These guys are laughing, but down deep, they know I'm right on this too. A better named institution of higher ed that will be able to dovetail their purposes into what's going on here. And that's not the only institution, but I hope that there's an overt effort to make sure that we reach out to all of our higher ed institutions, faculty, as well as students, to make sure that to the extent possible, they can participate and they can be blessed by this center.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I agree with you completely. In fact, we have somebody from Atwood Innovation from down in that area specifically. And in fact, I've already met with their economic director for the city of St. George and a couple others of how do we make sure that we're bringing the resources from what we're doing and really partner well with them. And I will say it's been great to get the feedback from them that they're excited. They want to work with us. And so I think there's going to be a great relationship with Utah Tech.
Thank you. I just have another question, if it's okay, on the timeline that is still up on our screen. I really like the aggressive timeline. And I would hope that as you wrap things up next fall in November, that it would include not only concept organization, but also some recommendations as to actual physical space. And including infrastructure needs and building needs. And I just had a sidebar conversation with our director to make sure that we're making an allowance in our phase 1 plans to accommodate this, because I think getting this off as one of our priority projects is really critical to what we're trying to accomplish here. So
yeah,
do you think we might see some of that in
that's absolutely part of the plan. Yeah, we're going to be talking about space. We're going to talk about human capital. We're going to talk about financial capital, right? What are the capital needs in the state, and how do we make sure that we're providing that kind of resource, especially in the life science space? There's a need there. But specifically on the space, we plan to come back and give you some really good examples. Even when I went to St. Louis, I was taking a lot of pictures that we'll take back to that committee and say, well, what do we really want this to look like? And as we gather more and more of that information, we hope to be able to come back with a more definitive idea of what should that be, looking at how do we in terms of the anchor tenants that you're bringing in, how do we work alongside with these startups to get the full value? How do we make sure that these anchor tenants are providing the workforce needs, alignment? So all of that, I think, will be part of this plan that we'll have for you in 6 months. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Oh, we do. Oh, we've got a quorum. No other hard questions for you there, Jefferson. So
okay.
Thank you very much for joining with us today. And thank you for dedicating your talents to this. I think you can sense that it's important. We think it's important for our state. We think it's important for the citizens. We really think it's important for the students too, for lots of reasons. And thanks, Dave, for help of higher ed as well. So with that, we now have a quorum, as I just mentioned. We're going to go back up and pick up the regular order of our agenda now that we can take action. So let's go to item number 3, which is to approve the minutes of our last meeting held April the 12th, 2022. I think you've been given a copy of those minutes. The chair would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner. The motion is made by Commissioner that we approve the minutes. Do I have a second, please? Seconded by Jim. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Thank you very much. So the next item on our agenda is to consider prison chapel preservation proposal. We have received, and I think you've received, a copy of a written proposal from Preservation Utah to preserve an existing chapel currently in use at the State Correctional Facility in Draper. We appreciate very much the submission of that proposal, along with the information and also the creativity that's gone into that proposal. And I think we've all had a chance to look at that. I'd also mention that some of the members of the board, I don't know, 8 weeks or so ago, Lieutenant Governor and I, was it that 4 weeks ago, had a chance to actually visit the correctional site and tour that chapel. And it certainly made a difference in my mind, having looked at that facility and also having heard from the correctional staff about what that facility meant to the people that access it, the inmates there. So we appreciate receiving that, and we will now recognize David. Is it Ammet? I hope I'm pronouncing that. Is that correct? Please come forward, David. We're going to recognize you, and I think you may have some guests as well. And we're going to turn the time to you to present your proposal and also answer questions of the board.
Okay, thank you so much. It is a true pleasure to address this committee again. I had the opportunity to address all of you about 2 years ago.
So David, just we go through this. Would you just state your name again and who you represent?
Yes, David Ammet, Executive Director of Preservation Utah. I am joined today by William Lawson, who will help me with this presentation, and I'll allow William to more formally introduce himself here in a few minutes. But as I was saying, thank you for the opportunity to present to all of you. I understand that time is limited and you all are very busy, so I want to keep this as contained as possible. If I can just figure out how to advance the slides. Oh, here we go. Just to provide you all with a map of my short presentation, to keep us all on track, I wanted to give you, again, the chapel history in a nutshell, using some illustrations, some illustrated slides. Talk about the chapel use, what it could become, should it be saved, how all of that would be paid for, and perhaps the most important question is, why do it at all? So to talk about the chapel history, I want to take us all back to the 1940s. The Sugar House Prison is no longer adequate for the needs that it was built in the 19th century to serve. And so we build the prison in Draper. And initially there is great hope for the prison in Draper. As you can see from this editorial from the Salt Lake Tribune from, I believe, 1948, building good citizens, not punishment, is laudable philosophy at the new Utah State Prison. The inmates are thrilled to leave the Sugar House Prison when that ultimately happens in the early 1950s. But within a matter of months, things go south at the Draper facility. As you can see here, these two newspaper articles, both from August 18th, 1951, one the Desert News, one the Salt Lake Tribune, the woes of the prisons, and funds asked for additional prison improvements because the building is not really adequate to serve the needs for which it was designed. And in part, that's a problem of the designing process. The building is really a product of the late 1930s, but because of lingering issues related to the Great Depression and World War II, it's not built until the early 1950s, which means we basically have a building that from its onset is a decade plus late in responding to changing needs. And these issues persist at the penitentiary. Even, several years after, here in this case, 3 years after the prisoners move into the Draper facility, there's not a sewage treatment plant. There are not a lot of basic infrastructure needs still at the building that should have been implemented even from the get-go. So due to these growing frustrations and other matters, in 1957, on February 7th and February 8th, the Prisoners Riot. And this is a big scene that attracts national and even international attention. And as part of the process of quelling the prisoners and their discontent, Governor of Utah, Governor Clyde, accepts 40 different requests in the form of a petition from the inmates. Most of these requests, from what I've gathered, go unaddressed, including request number 20, which is to have a prison chapel. So at that point, the prisoners take matters into their own hands and they design a prison chapel themselves. And this wonderful illustration of the prison chapel is published in local newspapers. This one is Sunday, May 19th, so not so long after the prison riot, 1957. The initial proposal for the prison chapel, generated by the prisoners themselves, is produced. And this is credited actually to a specific prisoner, but you can imagine the whole cell block was involved in designing this building. And it's remarkable how similar this initial design is to what ultimately gets built. But in order to make this dream of a prison chapel a reality, it needs larger, more prominent support and an advocacy within the community. And so it's adopted by Governor Clyde, who the next year, in the next summer, declares a whole month as Prisoner Chapel funding or fundraising month. This happens in July of 1958. Here you see Governor Clyde himself helping to construct part of the prison chapel. And in the years that follow, there is an outpouring of support from all of Utah, people from all walks of life. The International Order of the Eagles holds a dance. Seminary students from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Bountiful hold a coin drive. Italian-American groups give the chapel $400. The LDS Church gives $8,000. These articles are legion as you look through local publications through 1958, 1959, and beyond. And ultimately, the chapel is built. It's dedicated initially by President Hugh B. Brown of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints First Presidency, and then other denominations follow suit. This happens in 1961. And after that, of course, the chapel becomes a great point of service and dedication and transformation. And I'll talk about that more later on here in a few minutes. But why don't we transfer now to talk about what this chapel can be used as the prison moves, obviously, from Draper to a point west. This building, in order to really serve its purpose, needs a new purpose. And as you can see, we, speaking on behalf of the preservation community, are open to see it become any number of things, from a continued chapel, still continue to serve that use, to an office space, perhaps a co-working space, in response to the innovation district that will appear around this building shortly. I did note, especially with the idea that it could be an office space, this could be very easily linked to a neighboring office building, and that's what this illustration shows. Old building, new building, and oftentimes what you can do is build a glass pavilion between these two structures and bring them together and make them work for new purposes. Chapel funding, the numbers I think will speak for themselves. I will not address these directly, but certainly would be open to answering questions that anyone may have about these numbers. As you can see, there is a low budget option. There's a full renovation. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank my colleagues, namely Stephen Cornell and Charles Shepard, both preservation architects, for helping me generate these numbers. I greatly appreciate their support in fulfilling this part of the request for the proposal. Finally, let's talk about why to save the chapel. And I'm going to talk about why to save the chapel on the basis of urbanism. And then I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague here, William, to talk about the stories that this chapel has to tell. And that's basically why I think, even from an urbanist perspective, the chapel deserves to be saved. Here I have a picture of Rome, and I bring this picture of Rome and the Roman Forum to all of you. And the idea that Rome wasn't built in a day, to discuss the evolution of the point community itself. Like Rome, like any great city, like any great community, greatness will come, I think, to the point community from the get-go, but it will increase over time. Because as urban environments change and evolve and gather layers of history and layers of narrative, they become more interesting, more compelling, and more gripping to the people who live, work, and visit there. And I think from the get-go, saving the chapel, even from this urbanist perspective, would introduce this texture and critical narrative to the point development. It would be a building that would stand in contrast to all the new buildings around it and indicate that this site has a past, it has a story to tell. And the chapel itself tells a compelling story. I'm not the best person to tell these stories because in many ways I am new to this chapel. I've been researching its history for the last really 6 months. My colleague William has experienced this chapel firsthand over years and years through his experience at the Utah State Penitentiary. And so at this point, I'm going to pass the baton to William and let him tell you his own stories, which of course are replicated in the lives of the hundreds, perhaps thousands of individuals who have passed through this building's doors. So William, take it away.
Would you like me to begin by formally introducing myself?
That would be great if you'd state your name, and that would be helpful, and then you can make your comment.
Thank you. My name is William Lawson. To start with, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak here today. It is an awesome honor and privilege to add this experience to my personal narrative. And it fits actually really well. So if you give me just a few minutes, I'd like to share my story and why I'm here and why I believe that it's relevant to this meeting today. I'm going to start by, and you all have a copy of this, so I'm just going to pull quote 2 sentences from something that Mr. Ammet has already presented to you, because it's a perfect introduction to my own personal narrative here today. As a powerful symbol of Utah's justice system, the Utah State Penitentiary in Draper is an architectural complex that engages and implicates us all. Like the Sugar House prison that preceded it, the Draper prison will disappear before the public has had a chance to experience or really understand the resource. Prison Chapel offers a way to accurately document the decades of complicated history that have occurred behind the Utah State Penitentiary walls. I am a living piece of that complicated history. My experience intimately, anyway, with the chapel at the State Penitentiary in Draper began in 2012, almost immediately after being given a life sentence without parole by the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole. Almost immediately, I was transferred from my then housing to the state prison, back to the state prison in Draper, where very shortly thereafter, I was given the amazing opportunity to participate in the chapel as the lead clerk. As such, I worked directly and very closely with all facets of the chapel. I worked with the chaplain, I worked with volunteers, with every organization that participated in the ongoing daily events that occurred at the chapel. And of course, I worked very intimately and closely with not only the volunteers that participated in the events there,
but with all of the inmates that found refuge inside the chapel. I guess probably the largest impact that the chapel had on me personally was that I had entered my experience with the chapel and my position as lead clerk at probably the lowest point in my life that anyone could possibly experience. I'd just been told that mine had changed forever, that the Utah State Penitentiary would be my home for the rest of my life. And I simply had to find a way to deal with it, having been given absolutely zero emotional resources by which to do that. Fortunately, I was offered the opportunity to participate in the chapel as a clerk, and that absolutely changed my life and most likely probably saved it. I was able to work directly again with inmates, volunteers, individuals as prominent as Mac Wilberg, who
Okay, good. All right.
I think you should all, those of you who are on virtually, check your mics, make sure they're muted. We're getting some feedback here. Thank you. I'm sorry, Wayne.
I was able to work with individuals as prominent as Mac Wilberg, who is the director of the LDS Tabernacle Choir. I was able to work with many phenomenal individuals who brought their hearts and souls. David and Mary Aguirre, to mention just one, that was the heart and lifeblood of what happened inside that chapel. You know, in addition to, as was mentioned earlier, in addition to inmates coming into that chapel and being given the opportunity to find God, what was just as important is the opportunity to be able to walk out of the main corridor of that incredibly cold and isolating place where we all had to live. Walking into that chapel provided each one of us the opportunity for just a moment, a piece of our day, to again touch base with dignity, self-respect, self-worth. It also provided us an opportunity to be around the amazing volunteers that participated in the chapel program, to participate with them and interact with them and use them as sort of a mirror to the people that we had not been possibly in our previous lives, and as a model for who it is we needed and wanted to become as productive and morally responsible citizens should we ever leave that place. That was probably and probably remains the most important component of the chapel, is the opportunity that it provided individuals to regain self-respect, dignity, self-worth, to participate in things that were personally and socially responsible, to participate in the idea of once again becoming a better person, of reintegrating back into society as a productive and moral citizen. You know, one of the things that struck me the most was something that was said by many of the volunteers that participated in the programs there, including Mr. Kirby Hayborn, who I worked with very closely along with prison personnel and the chaplain in the making of a segment of a series on BYU TV called Making Good, highlighting a Christmas special one year. He and others had indicated that what they took away from their experience at the chapel was that they were surprised by the fact that it felt almost guilty that it helped them more than they believed that they were able to help anybody that they had come in contact with there. The experience of being able to come into the chapel as a volunteer and provide the incredibly important and needed component of helping inmates progressing forward with dignity and self-respect was something that was beneficial, not just to the inmate, but of every single volunteer that participated in the programs out there.
Excuse me, William, I don't want to cut you short, but we've got, your comments are extremely helpful, but I need to have you try to wrap up. If you can.
I'm closing right now. Thank you very much, sir. So in closing, and I thought about a lot about this. For me anyway, personally and anecdotally, saving the chapel isn't necessarily so much about preserving the memory of a piece of the prison, but an opportunity to preserve what it represented, and in doing so, preserve a piece of the best of who we are as human beings. And I think that that's exactly what the chapel symbolizes, as opposed to just a piece of architecture from the state prison that we're trying to save. Thank you very much once again for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. Clearly, I'm not still serving life in prison at the Utah State Prison, and I owe an incredible debt to the chapel and the programs there in helping form the person that I am today as a productive and responsible and moral citizen that's now walking among you again. That would not have happened without the chapel, and it's not a story that's not shared by others. Thank you again very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. As I said, they're very helpful. And David, thank you as well.
Thank you. We know time is short, but if there's any questions, we'd be happy to address them in this meeting, or of course you have our contact info and you could reach out to us.
Why don't you remain seated, and we're going to take questions from members of the commission if there are any. It is. So we don't have any questions, but we're also going to receive a discussion. Oh, there may be a question. And I'm going to ask you if it's a motion to hold off for just a few minutes until we get discussion. I'm going to recognize Mayor Walker. You've joined us online. I'm going to recognize you first, and understand you may have a motion or you may have a comment or both.
I had both, Mr. Chair, but I had a question for David. With respect to can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. With respect to the budget, if you could pull your slide back up, maybe on your budget item. This anticipates the building remaining in its position currently. Is that correct?
Yes. There was no contemplation that the building would be moved in making these estimations.
Okay. With respect to your view of preservation, and I appreciate your presentation, and you and I've obviously talked lots of times about this. I think this building probably is the one of the buildings that makes some sense to preserve for all the reasons that you have in your presentation. My question to you is, do you feel like the preservation, I guess, objective is achieved if we preserve the building, but we might have to move it to a location that doesn't necessarily impede what's going to happen on the site, but find a spot on the site where it might, fit better and be able to, serve even maybe a little better purpose with respect to its location and what it means. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Walker. I would still consider that a preservation win. My only hesitation with the idea of moving the building is that would probably make it ineligible for listing on the National Register, and therefore ineligible for tax credits. But if the building can only be saved by moving it, then I would still see that as a win. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. What level of tax credits do you think would be available for a project like this?
So I can't imagine that this is a good candidate for a residential structure. It would be probably a commercial structure if it was adapted, say attached to a neighboring commercial building or one that focused on innovation or industry. So that would then tip over to the federal tax credit, which would be 20% of the total costs of renovating the building. So building costs, say, just to make the math easy, $100,000 to renovate, that would be $20,000 back in the form of a federal tax credit.
Okay, and that's to the entity that renovates it.
Right. So long as that is a for-profit entity.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
So Mayor Walker, I'm going to come back to you in a minute, but I have a question, if it's okay, and it's somewhat related to your last one. And David, I'd like to know, in your work for Preservation Utah, are there times where your organization reaches out to other stakeholders, parties that could take an interest? And I'm struck by hearing all of the comments that this is Utah that has deep roots in religious and spiritual convictions for lots of reasons. And I also think, I'm not speaking for myself, I think we believe in redemption, and we as Utahns, regardless of your religious affiliation, believe that that we are capable of making changes in our life with the help from powers on high, and our churches and our chapels become helps us in that effort. So my question is part of your proposal would be to conduct an outreach and see if those resources could be connected and donations could be received from organizations, maybe interfaith councils or other religious groups that could assist with this?
So currently, at any given time, we have about 25 or 30 buildings that we are advocating for across the state. And currently we are doing exactly what you described with about 10 of those. And so that is what we do, everything from the Corinne Methodist Chapel up in Box Elder County, which is the oldest non-LDS religious building in the state, to the Wasatch Mountain Club Lodge up in Brighton, to the Kaysville Stone Library in the heart of that community. We are always essentially searching for funding for these preservation saves and wins that we are trying to make. So I would see this as just an extension of the work that we have already been doing really for the last 55, 56 years.
And if the donations were significant enough, it doesn't, I'm guessing that the tax credits is not as much of an issue as it would be if this were a private for-profit enterprise looking for those credits.
Right. I mean, oftentimes what happens when we solicit community donations for these types of projects is it is not for a for-profit cause. And therefore, tax credits aren't really even a question, because it's nonprofit or community use or a municipality that we are trying to assist. And of course, those entities don't pay taxes.
All right. Other questions before I go back to Mayor Walker? Madam Lieutenant Governor. Representative Handy, did you still have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Very, very quickly, thank you for being here, William. That was heartfelt and wonderful, and all the best to you, and congratulations on where you are now in your life. All the best. David, amazing presentation. Did you total up the amount of outside donations that built the chapel?
You
were talking about a number of various total. Did you get a total outside donation number?
So in the end, the chapel cost about $140,000 to build, which was under budget. And a lot of those, and I say about because it's hard to really tally up the value of the in-kind donations that were offered.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
What's fun is you read the Salt Lake Tribune from, June 1959, and they're making a call for paint, 50 gallons of paint to beautify the walls of the chapel. And so that paint is donated through some means, and I don't really know how to value that paint,
I think
but
that's okay.
approximately it's $140,000 in total. And that includes the work that the inmates put to build the chapel
Sure,
itself.
Sure. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's it.
Thank you very much, Representative Haney. Now, Mayor Walker, let's go to you for your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David, I appreciate your presentation as well and our discussions over the years. I've thought a lot about this particular concept for preservation, and many of you know I've not been an advocate of preserving actual prison block buildings or any of those things, and I I don't think those really do much for us with respect to our history. But this chapel has a place in the hearts of many people. Certainly has a place in the hearts of people in my community. I've heard from them, listened to them. Lieutenant Governor Henderson was persuasive to me when we were standing in the chapel and looking at it, and I appreciate the interest that we have. I think if we are to preserve anything from the place, I'd like it to be this, and maybe the lock mechanism. My motion, Mr. Chair, would be that we direct our staff to find a way to preserve the prison chapel at a different location than where it sits, and otherwise be able to move it to a location where it will fit in the project in a way that it can enhance what it brings to memories and its history and our current project going forward, and that we seek funding both privately from Preservation Utah and donors and any we can get from the state to move the building to a right location. I think there's probably a place it can go that will really enhance the opportunity for people to go that are interested and care about it. I'd also like, as part of that motion, to take off my prior motion about preserving a guard tower, so that the item that we would preserve would be this chapel and the locking mechanism that's in the old main cell block, the Johnson bar system. The way that could get preserved would be up to corrections. They could put it in some type of museum or something, but that'd be my motion, that we find a way to move the chapel to a good location with the eye to collecting as much in private donations. David, you're gonna have to help us, and what we can get from the state, but to put it in a spot that works for our project.
Thank you, Mayor, for your motion. Let me see if I can restate it in such a way that you feel comfortable with. The motion is that our commission, our board, work with staff to take action to preserve the chapel, work with staff to find an appropriate location within the Point project, a location that would be more appropriate than perhaps where it is now, and that we work with Preservation Utah to seek donations and maybe on our own, and also make application to legislature at the appropriate time for an appropriations to accomplish this, and at the same time withdraw your prior motion and our prior action, which was to preserve a guard tower. Does that state most of the points?
That gets it. You might add in there the preservation of the locking system as well. And then I might finally add that this is it. This is the building we're preserving, and we're moving on from this discussion. We'll work on saving this.
Thank you. And also included in that is preserving the historical lock mechanism, which actually originates back to the site, the old site. So I think that states the motion. Do I have a second for that motion? Representative Handy seconding the motion. Now we'll entertain discussion on the motion that's before us. I'm going to go to Lieutenant Governor Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't know anything about the prison chapel until a few months ago. I'm fairly new to all of this. Past year or so, got tasked with being on this board. And really, when I visited the Draper prison for the first time last year, I thought, you know, we've got to preserve something. And my idea originally was a guard tower, because they, you know, are an obvious reminder of what was once in that site. And that site is going to be what it will be in the future because of what it was in the past. And I think it's important to remember that. But I didn't know about the chapel. And then I heard about the chapel from you guys and from others, and finally went and visited it, as Representative Snow said, about 4 weeks ago. And what I love about the chapel is what you gentlemen both described is the broader meaning for it. I love the story behind it. I love why the chapel was built. I love how the chapel was built. And I love the redemption and the hope that it symbolizes. I think that it's the right thing to do to preserve this chapel. And I'm not necessarily concerned about moving it if we have to move it. I am a little concerned about being prescriptive about saying that we're going to move it right now. I am a little concerned about being prescriptive about saying we're not going to preserve anything else as part of the motion, but I am very happy about the idea that we might save the chapel. Just to the, where are we? Just to the south of us is Council Hall. That building is significant for a lot of reasons, one of which is because that's where the first vote of any woman under an equal suffrage law took place here in Utah, 152 years ago. And that building wasn't there originally. It was down the hill, and it got moved. But I don't think that the move in any way diminishes the significance of that building. So I'm not concerned about the move. I do think that if prisoners and the community, I love the Felon Follies. I love the fact that there were rodeos and other ways that that the inmates and the community members work together to raise the funds to build the chapel. And I have no doubt that we can do something similar to raise the funds necessary to preserve it. And I think we should. And I want to just thank you. Thank Preservation Utah. Thank all of you who have brought this to our attention and pushed so hard to make sure that we were taking a good, honest look at this and not just dismissing it out of hand. So thank you for that. I think it's really important. I do, if we're only going to preserve the chapel and the lock, I don't know if I can amend the motion, maybe create a substitute motion. I think we should also preserve those bathroom signs. The Art Deco ones, you remember those, right? They're really cool. They're original and they would be really easy to, yeah, anyway, that would be my only, I guess, real change, significant change.
So Mayor Walker, would you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Absolutely.
The restroom signs. So.
The bathrooms.
You mean the ones, the metal ones, Lieutenant Governor, that we at the entrance when you in the kind of that main entrance area?
Yes.
Yep. I know
Okay.
She showed them off to me and I was impressed too. So I think they're worthy of being
Old school bathroom signs.
So where we are is there is a motion before us and we are taking discussion comments on the motion. Let's go to April. If you have a comment.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Comment to the motion?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay. Comment or is this allowed for just discussion?
This is a discussion to the motion.
Okay. Thanks to everyone for all of their presentations. I feel like we've learned a lot listening to people over several months over these meetings, and I was not able to do the physical visit, but I'm glad to hear from board members that were able to go see it. I agree with those that are saying that I think it's a little preemptive right now to say whether we're moving it or not moving it, or even for sure preserving it. I would be more inclined to say that we're still studying whether or not we're going to preserve it, only because I haven't really heard yet if we've checked for everything like asbestos, lead-based paint, that it's not going to be an environmental detriment to keep it. What if they start getting into renovations and find that it's much more significant than they thought, and then they don't have the funds? So I think it would be interesting to have the funds raised before then. But I think it's fine that there's a motion to go ahead and make a decision right now instead of continuing to table it. So I just wanted to give those comments in case it down the line, months down the line, turns out to be a little bit different than everyone thinks. So I also think we have a lot of population in Utah that we're representing that may not want to preserve it. We're hearing from people that want to preserve it, but I'm not sure we're hearing from a lot of the other population. And I feel like us as board members that we have to represent both sides of the 3 million people that live in Utah. Anyway, so I appreciate everything. I appreciate that we're doing a vote today, and I just wanted to put in those comments. I'd like to see it be successful, but I still have a few questions going forward.
Thank you, April, for your comments. Further discussion to the motion. Let's go to Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It doesn't feel, you really got to get close to this thing, don't
Yes,
you?
you do.
We need a shorter table or longer stems. So, you know, I'm certainly in favor of preserving this chapel. I think that's a great idea. I have similar concerns to what April has raised and Lieutenant Governor on being prescriptive, saying we have to move it. I think that might prove to be a little bit difficult. I like the idea of preserving it, but not saying that we're going to have to move it. To move that prison is going, or to move that chapel is going to be very expensive to move to historic unreinforced building, and it just we may not be able to fund that and make that work. And we may have to find a way to make it work where it's in the current location and study that a little bit farther. So I would just say, you know, with the way that we're managing the property there and not selling it outright, I think it'd be really difficult for any business to come in and even pay the preservation costs and use it. And if we put in this significant investment to move it, it almost surely then would have to be a state investment and a lease back situation, which we can certainly do, but we have no idea whether the legislature would support that type of funding level to move it. So I would just, my thought is that we just need to back away from saying it has to be moved for sure.
Thanks for your comments, Jim. Further discussion to the motion. I'm going to go to Mayor Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. Thank you for being here. We appreciate that. And I want to say thank you to everybody who took the time to send in letters and to write their correspondence as well. I agree with April that we have a lot of people with, you know, different opinions, but the people we've heard overwhelmingly from are those who are asking for this to be saved. I personally haven't heard from anyone who's been asking for this not to be saved. And since this has been a discussion for quite some time, the opportunity has been there. And I'm not saying that no one might come forward and say, well, we didn't realize that. And you know, we feel differently, but we've heard from a lot of folks that feel similar. And this is not a new conversation. It's been a very public conversation available. And so I just wanted to point that out. This is who we've heard from. For me, it's been unanimous. This is who I've heard from. I appreciate the presentations and the conversation, and I really did appreciate the chance to go and tour. Thank you for the invitation to do that and the chance to join you on touring the chapel. I have friends who have, a variety of friends who have served there in different capacities as volunteers, and I know that they have tender memories and have made lifelong friendships with inmates who are there. And I'm going to echo the sentiment that there is value. There's absolutely value in keeping this. Along the lines of whether it stays, whether it moves to a different location, my only concern is that we don't even know the answer to that yet. We haven't done the study and the work yet to determine, is this the right place? We have a plan. We have a plan for the point all drawn out, and we've got We've put a lot of good work into that over the last 4 years. However, we haven't really studied that yet. So I think once a decision is made today, then I'd like to do the study to find out does it work in that site where it currently is? And can that be part of the flow to be a very successful and cohesive flow? Or is it best? And is it possible? And can we afford it? And is there a way to move it to a place on the site that works better? We do have a history of doing that in the state. We've got, if you go to This Is the Place Heritage Park, there are a lot of beautiful pioneer homes, similar to what you had mentioned with Council Hall. There are beautiful pioneer homes that weren't on that site before that have been moved there. There's history of that. I'm not concerned if we have to move it, that it's going to not be as special as it currently is. I think we can absolutely make it that way if that's how it goes and if that's how it turns out. But Mayor Walker, I'm going to ask if you'd be open to a friendly amendment to the motion to preserve the chapel and to preserve the lot and absolutely to preserve the groovy, cool bathroom signs that are retro, that are cool. But to not be as prescriptive about moving it and a little broader, simply to agree to do the study to determine if it's in its best site right now or if we need to move it somewhere else, and just to do the work of figuring it out. It's the most important thing to all of us is getting this right. We've tried really hard to work with stakeholders across the state to make sure we get this right. And I think we just need to put the study and the time in to find out the right location for the chapel, but I'm very supportive of saving it. Would you be?
Thank you,
amenable
Mayor.
to that?
We're gonna go to him and see if take that up. But I think procedurally, we need to clarify the current motion that's on the table. And Mayor, we've had a lot of discussion here, but would you mind restating the intent or what your motion is that's currently before us?
Happy to. I move that we preserve the prison chapel, that we direct staff to find the most economical and feasible way to preserve it. If it can remain where it is, fine. If it has to be moved with respect to the opportunity costs that its location creates, that we figure out, have staff figure out what it's going to cost, where it will work. If it will work where it is, fine. Preserve it there. If it has to be moved, we figure out how to preserve it. We preserve the bathroom signs, the historic bathroom signs, and the prison lock. And that's my motion.
All right, thanks for that clarification. Are there any questions about the motion? So let me just restate so I think it's clear before we take vote. Your motion is that we preserve the chapel and we turn this issue on preservation to the staff to research and come back to us as what the most appropriate and economically feasible way to conduct this or have this preservation occur. Does that indicate, or does that pretty much state, in addition to the locks and the restroom signs?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And Representative Handy, you seconded that motion. You're still comfortable with your second? All right. We've taken discussion on the motion. I think it's ripe now for a vote. All in favor of the motion as it's been stated, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Mayor Walker, and thanks, members of the board, for your discussion.
And Mr. Chair, if I might add, the city of Draper may still be interested in looking for a way perhaps to move one of the towers to a location at one of our parks or places. We're not opposed to looking into that to see what the cost of that, might be as part of, some other further preservation. We're open to looking to see if it might fit, or what the feasibility of that is. But I can have that discussion later on. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor. And I'm sure staff is listening, and we'll have that discussion with Draper City, hopefully before the demolition occurs. So, all right.
Thank you all for your time and consideration, and we look forward to working with staff on this moving forward.
Thank you, David. Thank you, William. Thanks for everyone here that has an interest in preserving the chapel. So with that, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is to review the procurement policy and make some or consider some revisions. Members of the board, you will recall in our April meeting, we directed staff to revise elements of the procurement policy. You've all received a proposed draft of those changes. Conceptually, the idea was that we would not have to come back for board approval on every, I don't want to say minor, but less substantive changes that need to take place, or procurement issues that can be resolved by our director and staff. So with that, I'm going to turn the time to Alan to talk about those revisions and why he thinks and why we believe that it's important to consider those. So Director Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we've thought about the direction we received to revisit our procurement policy, I think we've been driven by kind of three major objectives. One is to preserve the integrity of the procurement process. We need to make sure that it's a trusted process, that it's objective and rigorous. The second is to be efficient. We need to be able to make decisions quickly at the speed of business. And not always wait for a board meeting to be able to do things. We also recognize that sometimes in putting in too much process, the cost of that process can significantly outweigh any potential savings. And so there's a balance there. And then I think the third objective is to respect the real purpose of the board, which is to be dealing with bigger picture strategic issues and not get too bogged down into the minutia. So we've proposed a revision to our procurement policy. There's frankly nothing terribly magical about the numbers, but maybe most of the things you'll see in there were clarifications, but maybe three items of substance. One is that we've raised from 5,000 to 20,000 those procurement activities that would require a competitive process. Again, $5,000, if we went through a competitive process to save, tens or maybe even hundreds of dollars, it wouldn't pencil out. Secondly, increasing the threshold for board approval of a contract from 50,000 to 100,000 or above. Again, that allows the board to be involved in significant decisions, but not get involved in smaller contracts. And then the third, again, at the suggestion that you made in our last meeting, to have a percentage amount above what you've approved that we can approve on it. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little. That we can approve in an amendment to a contract, a change in scope, change in term, up to 20% above what you've approved. So to state that again, if you as a board approve a contract at a certain amount, we have the flexibility, if circumstances change, if it's clearly justifiable, to allow a 20% amount above that for contract amendments. In all cases, we think it's important to report those actions to the board so there are no surprises and you have an opportunity to review that. And that's something that we can certainly build in. So that's the overview, and I'm happy to respond to questions.
Thank you, Alan. Questions from members of the commission for Alan? Or questions for staff on the draft? Let's go to April.
So my question is, the 20% I don't have a problem with, but is there a limit to it? Like on a smaller contract, if it's a $300,000 contract and we have 60,000 overage, that's okay. But eventually, if we have like construction people or big contracts, like a demolition, and let's say it's like 10 or 15 million, 20% is a lot bigger. So I think the 20% over is okay, but I would like to have a cap or a limit on it.
Can you want me to respond? I certainly have no objection to that. The fact is, if it were that much, there's no way I'd approve that on my own. I just wouldn't put myself in that position and would be back to the board. But
Right. Well, and I'm not saying you would, but we just never know as things change down the line, since this could be, 20 or 25-year project. I don't want us to get into a situation where like, oh, we didn't realize that somebody could easily tack 2 or 3 million on without bringing it to the board. So I think for now, you need those increases so you don't have to bring everything to the board. But I'd also like some caps on it, just so that when we can't predict what's going to happen in the future, or who's going to be potentially on the board, our positions, things are going to change over the years.
I certainly have no objection to that, April, and would welcome any input on what you or others think the right cap might be.
Thank you, April. Jim, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just reading through it. I was thinking that 20% cap could be more like a $100,000 cap, but I'm not so concerned about the percentage. I mean, the things that Alan and the staff would be issuing contracts for is not going to be the construction of the site, right? And so I think there's very little risk there. But I do just feel like that, our Alan and our staff they've done a fantastic job, and I think we need to trust them a little bit more and get a little more out of their way. And I think the $100,000 limit's a little low. So I personally would think more in the lines of like $250,000, I think would be in line.
Thank you. Further discussion or questions for Alan?
This is April. I just wanted to say, yeah, I agree with Jim. I like the whole idea of today that we're giving them, delegating more empowerment to them, because I think Alan and his whole group have done a great job. And the limits right now at 5,000 and I can't remember 50,000, the other one, were too low. So I have a lot of trust in them. So I'd like, when somebody makes a motion, I'd like the limit to maybe be about 200 to 250,000.
Thank you, April, for the comments. Further questions for Alan? Mayor Ramsey.
It's not so much a question for Alan, and I could save this till after a motion, but I just want to say that I appreciate it, and appreciate that we're at the point now where the board doesn't have to be involved in every single decision, right? We have such a sophisticated professional staff who we've brought together and are working really hard, that I am supportive of this. I don't want it, now that we've reached this point in the project, I don't want us to impede the progress because of bureaucracy, right? And so I am supportive of this and think this is a good idea and the right way to move forward, so we can continue to move forward. We're still involved with everything. But some of these details, and it's not minutia when it's money like that. It isn't. It is important, but we have brought together an outstanding team, and I trust their decisions and appreciate their willingness to feel the same way about this project that we do, that we all are here to try to get this right, and I trust that.
Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. And I would just add to that, if that's okay, that doesn't mean in any of our expenditures that our board is not still going to conduct oversight.
Right.
And I think the makeup of this board is such that we're conscientious, and I absolutely agree with you. We are fortunate to have the staff we have, and we're fortunate also to have the quality of board members that are going to conduct oversight. For further discussion or action, let's go to Jim. Try that now.
How about now?
I think so.
I'm ready to make a motion if you're ready to accept one.
A motion is in order.
I would motion that we accept the revisions to the procurement policy with the changes of the limit without board approval to be raised from 100,000 or whatever it currently is to $250,000, and that the modification limit be, instead of 20% or 120%, be $100,000. And then I'd like to speak to that a little bit.
Okay, the motion is that we accept these proposed revisions subject to those revisions that you've made. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do we have a second to the motion? Seconded by the commissioner. Back to you, Jim, for this, for your statement on the motion.
You're going to see in a few minutes, Scott's going to update you on virtually everything that's going on. I mean, they've been so transparent, and I think we need to extend more trust, and you're going to see that we're going to need to get more out of the way as a board
moving forward. And so I think this is a step in the right direction. I mean, they've been very good at communicating and being accountable. And I also want to make sure everybody knows this isn't circumventing a procurement process. Most of the services that Alan and Scott are soliciting are professional services, which are done under negotiation anyway, not under a bid contract. So, or a competitive bid. So I think this is a good change and leads us in the direction of giving them more responsibility and more purview that they've earned and extending more trust. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Further discussion to the motion that's before us? Not seeing any lights. We will place this motion for a vote. All in favor of the motion that we accept the revisions to the procurement policy with the limitations that were included by the maker of the motion, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and it's the revisions to the policy are accepted. Next matter on the agenda is the governance model update. We are, as you know, our process builds one concept on another. And as we build on the conversations we've had in recent board meetings, our staff has made further revisions and refined the governance model for our project. So we're going to recognize Scott Cuthbertson to share the latest version of the model. And with that, Scott, we'll turn the time to you and tell us what you've been up to and what your new model looks like.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I know we're a little pressed for time, so I'll try to be concise on this. We want to update you on our governance process and framework. You may recall some months back, we had a discussion about this that was more at kind of the 30,000 foot level. We brought that down to, I'd say, the 15,000 foot level, and we're planning to get more into kind of the tactics of it. We're already having those discussions, but this is a very busy slide here. There's a lot going on, so I'll try to just summarize what you're looking at. What we've done is taken the different stakeholders that need to be involved in the process of delivering this project, and we've laid them out on this vertical column on the left. You have the different developers who will be involved, of course, land authority staff and board, DFCM, our design review committee, Draper City, and then there's a bucket for third parties. We could fit 10 or more stakeholder groups into that bucket, and we've kind of laid out, how does this project sequence, what decisions need to be made, who's responsible, who executes, who needs to be consulted and informed. And so we have that laid out from master planning through the horizontal infrastructure design, then into construction of that horizontal infrastructure. And then we go into vertical design and then to vertical construction, then ongoing operations. And so in summary, this really kind of builds on the conversation we were just having about needing to move at the speed of business, needing the board, of course, to be the continual overseer of the project, but not needing to get down into the weeds on more minor decisions. They, of course, with our master plan, this design, this plan that we're going to get back from our developer candidates, they would approve that developer, approve that plan. Then we would go into kind of executing on that vision. And for major decisions or changes to that, we'd bring that up to the board for action. Otherwise, we would be informing you through these board meetings and through reports on how things are progressing. As we get into design work, we're going to be leaning heavily on DFCM. They have the staff and the resources and expertise to play that role of reviewing the designs for that horizontal infrastructure, conducting inspections, ensuring that quality is there. The land authority, of course, stays very involved in that process to ensure that we're staying coordinated. There's outreach as well to Draper City and to different third parties. That continues through construction. And then as you get into the vertical design and construction, these same parties would be involved, but we would also stand up a design review committee, somewhat like an architectural review board. And again, leaning on DFCM to help with inspections in the construction process, reviewing of permitting and so forth, issuing certificates of occupancy, and then you go into operation. And we've talked about this in the past, 15, 20 years from now, land authority more or less sunsets, and we have maybe the board coming in for periodic key decisions such as renewing a lease or changes to a development agreement, et cetera. Want to move to the next slide. This just gives kind of an overview of what the design review committee does, what they consist of. I think in the interest of time, we'll just skip to the next slide. You can kind of see how they're structured. But we envision this being a committee of 9 or so experts. These are volunteers that would be appointed by the board. They have expertise in the areas of architecture, landscape architecture, urban design and development. We want representation from the community to be representative of what needs to be. So we would look to have a member of this review committee be from Salt Lake County, one from Utah County, one from Draper City at a minimum. One of them will act as a chair. We would have as well 2 representatives from our citizen working groups that can kind of help fill this out. And their role would really be in that vertical building construction process, looking at the plans, making sure that they are in line with our design guidelines, which have been approved, that they're in accordance with the codes, covenants, and restrictions that have been set in the project. They would make decisions as to whether those plans meet the character that we're looking for on the site in accordance to those guidelines. And then the DRC or Design Review Committee Oversight Board would retain ultimate, veto authority over those decisions. We're still working through the frequency of how often they would meet, what the voting rights look like, but we would look at the oversight board consisting of members of POMSLA as well as potentially Draper City appointee and DFCM appointee, those that are closest to the project. Where we're going with this next, we're going to gather feedback from our developer candidates, and we need to build it out in a little more detail, as I mentioned, in particular the third parties. You see here is a list of a starting list of those entities whom we've been talking with and need to, and we have started to set up a frequent cadence with to be coordinated on the project. You can see everyone from Draper City to the county to the agencies to canal companies, et cetera. And then we also want to kind of come up with a distinction of what's a major versus a minor decision that would need to be elevated either to the DRC Oversight Committee and as well to the board for actions. Also kind of detailing out the procedures for that design review committee. So that committee is, again, focused more on the vertical construction. So it'll be some time before they need to be stood up, but we want to have the whole framework in place and give you an update on how this is coming together and how we want to proceed as we get into development operations. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Questions from the commission? I've got a couple, Scott. This from the standpoint of review and careful review looks really good. My question is, sometimes with local governments, developers complain that the review process is so layered that it sets back time schedules significantly and sometimes increases the cost of construction in their project. Do you feel like we've got the right balance here? I see a lot, but are we going to be able to, do you feel like we're going to be able to move through those levels expeditiously and accommodate where we're wanting to go?
That's a great question and something that's on our minds, and we want to ensure that it doesn't cause any significant delays, but also still kind of protects the character of the plan and what's been approved. As we get into kind of detailing out the frequency and voting rights, et cetera, for that DRC, we'll ensure that's top of mind. I think for the horizontal design work and construction, that's more imminent. We are coordinating closely with the FCM. They have existing processes and have done this. So we're very confident there, and we'll make sure that we don't create log jams as we're setting up that DRC.
Okay. And then now that you mentioned DFCM, with this extensive review, do you anticipate that you and Alan and your team are going to require more staff to help staff these hearings and this process to guide folks through it, or do you feel like that we're with DFCM, we're going to be okay with their help?
Yeah, that's another great question, and one that we're talking about. We haven't made any decisions on that yet, but we're thinking through that. And there are a number of other, of course, areas in the project that we could be more closely involved with and may need support on either through consultants or potentially staff. We haven't talked specifically about what that looks like, but we're thinking about it.
Okay. Mayor Ramsey.
Thank you for that presentation. I just have a question. South Valley Sewers on here, Rocky Mountain Power, all this list, that's on the screen right now. It says Draper City for water as well. And so I just was checking, Draper's going to oversee all the infrastructure, water infrastructure. Are we working with the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District at all?
That's a good question. We are. There are more stakeholders that should be on this list, and certainly that South Valley Water or
Jordan Valley
Jordan
Water.
Valley
That's
Water.
good.
Thank you. Should be on that list as well.
Okay, no, I just wondered.
That's correct. That's correct.
Right, right. Draper gets their water from South Valley, not all of it, right? But yes, Jordan Valley, I mean.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, in fact, I was just going to go to you, Mayor Walker. Maybe you could help us with that issue.
I think part of this area is in water, what would be Water Pro's service area. So I don't know that this particular area would be Jordan Valley, but we should definitely include Water Pro in this chart, because the irrigation for sure they provide, and that's going to be key to all this open space and different green space that we are going to have. So we got to add Water Pro. The other thing I wanted to bring up with respect to roads, Scott, is I don't have a problem if Draper City owns the roads, but I may have a problem if we own them but we don't control them. So just to be clear on the liability for the roads, and if the city ends up owning the roads, do we have the full ability to maintain them and of course compensated for the maintaining of them? But I don't want to own the roads and then not have the ability to control them or take care of them the way we would normally take care of a road. Does that make sense?
That does, Mayor. Thank you for bringing that point up. And I think we're completely on the same page with you. We actually met with David Dobbins and his team yesterday and talked about that topic. And we plan to continue that conversation, have a road summit and get into more details on how that looks. But we hear you loud and clear and we're planning to accommodate that.
And I know for sure that the irrigation part would be Water Pro. We've taken some preliminary steps as a city to get pipe that direction to make it. But that's going to be a key for all this open space that we have, because irrigation water is much less expensive, of course, than culinary water and a better use. So let's just make sure we have Water Pro for the irrigation and then the roads. That's good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. I'm going to go back to Mayor Ramsey. I think she has another question.
Yeah, thank you. Just piggybacking on what Mayor Walker said, Water Pro, I'm almost positive is one of the member agencies that works with Jordan Valley Water. So I just want to make sure Jordan Valley has a seat at this conversation, the expertise from Jordan Valley Water to help. And then however that shakes out, right? Whichever role everyone's taking, great. But I just want to make sure that they're going to be part of that conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. We'll make sure that happens.
Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. Further questions for Scott? Mayor Walker, your hand's still up. Did you have anything else or are you okay? All right, thank you. All right, you'll notice that this matter is on the agenda for possible action, but I would also say to the commission, we can treat this more as an ongoing informational item as we progress on this issue. So I'm going to leave that up to the board. We'd entertain a motion. Well, let me go to Alan. Would you mind weighing in on that issue, or do you feel like we're ready on that? Is there a need? Tell us from your standpoint, if you don't mind, where we should be on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think our interest is just making sure we're heading in a good direction and getting your course corrections along the way. So it doesn't need to be in the form of a motion. Just if you've got some concerns or issues, this is an opportunity for us to hear them and respond. Yeah, we want to preserve the opportunity for a motion if you wanted to.
All right, that's helpful. Thanks very much, Alan. So with that, let's go to the next item on the agenda, which is from our communications folks, Muriel and your team, to give us an update. The X Factor team continues its great support of all that we're doing. I know I've had some interaction lately with Muriel, finding out how much interest there has been in this project nationally and internationally, and a lot of the credit for that interest goes to your team, Muriel. So thank you, and thank you for your for being here again. You're always here, and for providing an update.
Thank you, Representative Snow. I know that we're short on time, so I will be quick, but thank you for the opportunity to share a few items related to our communications efforts over this past year. So just wanted to hit a few highlights. Last December, here we go. In conjunction with the issuance of the request for proposals from the broader development community, we employed a national media strategy to raise awareness with the broader development community about what we were doing. We wanted to have that high level of visibility so that we could get the best and the brightest proposing. So we issued a national news release. It was picked up by a number of outlets. And over the past several months, we've gotten a lot of media coverage and interest nationally, which is exactly what we wanted. Here's just a representative sampling of some of that coverage. It's my understanding, Representative Snow, you sent this out to the board a few days ago.
Right.
So we were picked up in Bloomberg, in a number of Fox affiliates across the country, and you see some of that here. Just a few metrics we wanted to showcase in terms of the overall coverage. You'll see these upticks in media counts overall to date from January 2022 to now. We had about 150 counts of coverage, with those upticks being when we've issued either a release or seen a major outlet cover us. This one kind of tracks similarly with those counts of coverage, but this is reach. So what this is showing you is the number of potential viewers, readers, or listeners on various outlets across the country. Not that you've got that many millions of people tuning in to see our content, but that was the potential reach. In terms of engagement metrics, which I do just want to, emphasize that us communicators, we use these as what we call our bragging rights, but this isn't necessarily indicative of the true measure of success. The board has done such a phenomenal job over the past couple of years in making sure, for example, in the development of the Point Framework Plan, that not only were we engaging the public, but we meaningfully incorporated their feedback into the plan. And we see that in the number of signature features included in the plan that are a direct result of public feedback. The river to range concept, the innovative ways of looking at transportation on the site, the fact that a quarter of the site is open space, green space, active transportation. So that being said, back to bragging for a second. We've got some metrics. I will, mention this is aggregate from the start of our efforts 2 years ago, but they're pretty, pretty good. We had an overall 21,000 unique website users, meaning folks that have come to our website, to look at various content, various pages over the past 2 years. Social, always a powerful force. We have nearly 1.5 million total people reached via our current social channels. I will add that we recently secured an account on TikTok. We're not using it yet, but we've got that if there's some interest in utilizing that platform going forward. And then, of course, our email subscribers. You all are subscribed to The Point of View, our monthly email newsletter. You've seen these metrics before in terms of Utahns that we've surveyed, the public meetings that we've had, as well as the presentations given. And I'll just give a shout out to Alan. He presents so regularly to so many groups, makes himself available to that. And I know that a number of those groups and the public, they're much more informed as a result. And it's a lot of work, but it definitely increases our engagement and level of awareness with the public. Going forward, a few things that we wanted to just make you aware of is how we intend to highlight some of the finer grained studies and recommendations that the Point team has been working on. Alan and Scott, in conjunction with our consultants, has done a significant amount of effort in looking at preliminary studies, which you guys heard at your last board meeting. So we want to tell people about it, right? So for example, with housing, we are working, and when I say we, Alan and Scott are working closely with the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission to implement strategies that make housing at the Point more affordable. Currently listed in the framework plan, we have a number of housing units to help be part of the solution to Utah's housing crisis. So this will be one of the pitches we make to our local reporters and talking more about what we're doing with housing on the site. Another topic is economic opportunity. As you all know, we partnered with the Kim C. Gardner Institute on an economic analysis. We've got some great numbers that we want to talk more about. Smart communities concept, it's just smart planning. We've got some interesting recommendations here that we think will be of interest to local media. So moving on, for our development partner communications, our team has been in touch with each of the 3 finalist teams, their marketing and communications divisions, saying the same thing to each one of them, making sure that they know who we are. And then also, making sure that those expectations are set in advance and that we're on the same page with, who the spokespeople are for the Point, what our key messages are, and some tactics going forward should they be selected. Our goal here is to inform the public of the selection of the master development partners and then to involve the public in ongoing engagement efforts. So we are looking, of course, everything we do, we measure. We track, we analyze, we reassess. Some of our measurable objectives specific to our efforts with a future development partner will be that we want to increase awareness of who is ultimately selected to the public. And we're going to measure that by an aggregated increase in engagement on the Point's communications platforms by 30%. We want to do that through the end of August of this year. Anticipating, of course, that the board acts on a selection in July. We also want to secure a couple stories in industry publications. This story is so much bigger than just here local to our media market in Utah. So we want to make sure that we're staying top of mind for the broader development community and nationally. And you'll see that reflected also in our 3rd measurable objective, and that's garnering at least a dozen local and national news outlets, news stories about the selection. So we want to make sure that, again, we are employing a number of strategies to stay top of mind for the public. You'll see, of course, these strategies are further kind of, working to implement the measurable objectives I just discussed. Audiences, general public, we want to keep the public informed and engaged. As you all know, it wasn't since August of 2021 that we had kind of a larger public open house in conjunction with the release of the framework plan. And so we want to make sure that, we're telling the public our story and what we're doing. High-level messaging. You've heard this before. The Point is the most significant quality of life opportunity in state history. We're employing a rigorous and transparent competitive selection process in identifying a partner, and that we will, of course, continue to engage the public. Tactically, we would like to, similar to what we did with the planners prior to selection, December of 2020, we want to make sure that we're ready to go when an announcement happens, presumably in July. So we will have drafted joint releases with each of the finalists, ready for issuing when you all make a decision on the one. We'll also distribute that nationally. We're also recommending that when the time is right, perhaps when a development agreement has been established with the new partner, that we have a public engagement opportunity where the public can come and actually meet in person with many of you and with the partners themselves. It really helps to kind of personalize and humanize the partners and provide direct access to the public and asking any questions. Also, we're recommending kind of curating some joint videos. Videos are just such a great way of, helping to tell our story. 30-second videos that can be posted on our website, email newsletters, and social channels. And then, of course, desk side briefings with local media outlets so that, again, we can tell our story there. Those are just a few ideas of things that we're looking at going forward. And I'm happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Sorry, Muriel, I was
That's okay.
visiting with a member for that. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes. That's okay, Jim.
Well, we do have some questions. Before we do that, I just want to say again how much we appreciate your support. I know that I've been asked to do presentations from time to time, and I just want Muriel, you and Colton to know how much I appreciate you stepping up, making me look better than I am, and preparing the slides and the PowerPoints. The other thing I'd like to let the board know is Muriel and her team prepares a release or a bulletin that goes to every member of the legislature. And I think we're doing it every month or so, or every 2 months, over Lieutenant Governor and my name, and updating them. And that's all about keeping our leaders informed too of our progress and where we're going. I think that's very effective, and it goes to the issue of transparency among our colleagues in the legislature. So thank you. So let's go to comments. Mayor Ramsey first, and then we'll go to Representative Handy.
I just want to say a huge thank you. I think that X Factor has done a phenomenal job leading the communications. I want to thank Alan for his 10 zillion presentations that he's given. I know you, I know you do about that many. I know, but I just appreciate it because when we started this project, we all agreed that we want Utahns involved. We want people to know this is a very public, it's public land. It's a public project and intended to benefit the public, the residents of Utah. And I just appreciate how you've helped facilitate that. It's a lot of work to make sure that all of the work that's taking place, that people know about it and that they hear about it and that they have a chance to be heard and weigh in, and that gets incorporated into the work we're doing. I think you've done that masterfully. And I just want to thank you. I love that you are already coming together in lockstep with the potential master developers so that there's a communication strategy and plan firmly in place when that happens, in partnership with whoever that might be. I love that. I think that's important. So I want to say thank you and also ask how soon you might be able to start preparing Representative Snow to do some TikTok videos. I'm looking forward to that. I'm dying for that now. So yeah, stand by everyone. There will be.
Okay, are you done, Mayor?
I'll end on that note.
Colton, are you
I'm going to be
this?
fired. So yeah, he shuts the mic off. You're done. Yeah.
I think we can prepare something that goes viral.
Like that.
Yeah, oh, I'm counting on it. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. And let's go to Representative Handy now. And then I've asked Alan to comment as well. Representative Handy.
Yeah, thanks. Just quickly, I've spent my career in this space, as all of you know, but this is very sophisticated stuff that you're doing, Muriel, and your team. This is very sophisticated. And I really appreciate that you're tracking the metrics, the impressions. I think that's really, really terrific that we know, the audiences a little bit that we're reaching. And so way to go. I wanted to ask a quick question. When you put that about PR Newswire, when you put that out earlier, and got that national. Did you use PR Newswire? Is that where you got the national hits? Yeah, I would suspect so. So great. And then just a shout out to our director. I saw him at the One Utah Summit. You're getting so good at this, Alan. With his slides and strutting the stage, it was terrific on Tuesday. He did a great job. So thanks for that. So that was it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. He is getting good. And I say it often, but maybe not enough. We're really fortunate to have Alan and Scott and all of the staff that we have. Incredibly fortunate. Hope you all feel that way, because I don't just speak for myself. I think everyone on the board. So with that, Alan, but before I turn the time to Alan, you all know that we have another matter on the agenda, and visiting with Alan, what we've decided to do is, Aaron, I know you're online and don't want to disappoint you, but we're going to push that over to our next meeting. It's important discussion, but rather than force a discussion and not give you adequate time, we're going to make sure that we carve out time to take that matter up in our next meeting, if that's okay. So I anticipate adjourning shortly after Alan's comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I was using that practice strutting on the stage for the TikTok video that's coming up. So we'll just do that. But we've got such a great team. I just am so privileged to have our consultant team and Scott and others working with us. And this communications group has been terrific, responsive, professional, and just helpful in every way. So thank you. We've seen some of the metrics. Let me share just a couple of anecdotal examples of what's happening. Had a friend of mine send me a text last week with an article that he saw from Italy about the point. I was at an event last night and someone came up and said, boy, you're getting your news around. I saw something in the Guardian about what you're doing. Then I was talking to somebody at the governor's One Utah Summit, said they were at the Urban Land Institute conference in San Diego this last week, and said so many people that heard she was from Utah mentioned the point. So the word's getting out around the country. We've heard the same from our development partners, and that's great. We need to continue to make sure that we're sending the message to people in Utah, and we are. But, it's been a little harder in what we're doing, some of that backroom work to involve the public. So we're working very closely with Muriel and her team to identify ways that we can engage the public, continue to emphasize that this is a public project and that collectively we're seeking the public good through this project. So it's a privilege to be involved with all of you, and good things happening, more to come.
Thank you, Alan. Some great things and some great people to be associated with. So with that, I would accept a final motion. Mayor Ramsey. Motion to adjourn, seconded by Representative Handy. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
That passes. We stand adjourned. Thank you. All of you have a